Okay, hello. This is the first video on what I expect to be a four-part series, and it's all going to be based around thought work. And this particular introductory video is going to be on why we think negative thoughts. So it's going to be a neuroscientific and research-based perspective on why we think negative thoughts. And we're going to get right into it because I can put everything else in the description. So if you're someone who struggles with negative thoughts, or if you have a kind of dishwasher of thoughts going around in your mind, and I think that in particular, when it's a specific thought that's like causing damage to your life, you might be able to recognize with this feeling a little bit more, but it really feels like a washing machine, just like recycled thoughts again and again. And you might feel a little bit removed from those negative thoughts in the sense that you might not actually mentally believe them, but your physical reaction to the thoughts is really strong, that you actually act upon those negative thoughts. So the first thing to understand with thought work is that you are in control of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. You might not be exercising that control just yet. You might not have learned how to exercise it, but basically the preface of thought work is exercising that control. So we have three kind of minds: the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, and the analytical mind. And the analytical mind is what separates us from animals, okay? So we're able to identify a situation, perhaps subsequently first decide that it's dangerous, but then we can actually analyze the situation and make a better choice based on what we know to be true, as opposed to what our brains and our bodies are telling us is true. So why are we more predisposed to thinking negative thoughts than positive ones? This goes back to something we like to call negativity bias. When we were hunter-gatherers, our brains were predisposed and pre-wired to operate in survival mode kind of all the time. We have negativity bias in the brain, which is the brain's way of filtering out information and kind of going to the negative first. That's because we were constantly in a state of needing to survive, and the threat of danger was very likely. It was far more important for our brains to understand which plant was going to kill us as opposed to which plant tasted delicious. So that's something we like to call negativity bias. And our brains are kind of operating from a negative perspective. And the thing about negative thoughts is that they're 30 times stronger than positive ones. So let's say you get an insult from your parents or something, and it kind of marries to a very difficult thought that you feel about yourself. You can just attach it to a branch of the roots of that thought, and then these negative thoughts are just growing and growing. There is no minus button when it comes to thoughts. There's only a plus and a multiplication. So if you have been trying to eradicate negative thoughts and think positive ones, you're kind of already working off of a forest of possible negative thoughts, and you're trying to grow this little positive sprout, but it needs to have branches. It needs to have serious strength to survive against all of those negative thoughts that you were predisposed to think. So again, we know that we're hardwired for survival, but we also know that we have the opportunity to think analytically. So why don't we do that? It really has a lot to do with how our brains respond to events, as well as how our bodies react. So Kevin Jenks from Centered Meditation says that we're more or less 70% of the time in survival and stress mode. And it can take our bodies up to an hour to return to a normal state once that threat of stress is alleviated. So this stress response hormone can be triggered by something as simple as a traffic jam, getting on a packed train, talking to, someone that stresses us out, a boss, a manager, work, an email. It could be something that's really quite minute and quite minor that doesn't really require us to go into the stress response mode, but we're just so used to going into it. 70% of the time we're going into the stress response mode that it actually kind of becomes our norm. And so we're in an excessive amount of time producing that stress response hormone. It can have physical health problems, and it can also have mental health problems. If you've ever gone to the doctor and they said that maybe, it's due to stress, this is really our body's reaction to a thought or multiple thoughts, and it's our body's way of telling us that this is bad, that this is stressful, that we need to survive this, and it's a matter of life and death, when in actual fact it's not. So it can cause problems for our cardiovascular health. It can cause digestive issues. It can cause sleep issues. It can, of course, cause acute anxiety as well as minor anxiety. There really is so many ways that stress response hormone can negatively impact our bodies. And it's not because we should never feel stressed. It's because we're overusing it. We're overproducing it when we really don't need to. Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is a real thought work practitioner, and he is a neuroscientist as well, he says that we're always anticipating the worst case scenario. Out of the infinite potentials in the vast quantum field, we are selecting the worst possible outcome, and we are reacting with fear. So there is another reason why you could be producing that stress response hormone way more than you need to be. There's also another reason why you might be thinking some negative thoughts that have strong roots. And that has to do with what happened to us and our core memories. So every time we have a strong emotional response to something, if the emotional response is a certain amount of strength, like incredibly strong, this is called the refractory period, which is when a core memory is formed. The problem with core memories, especially negative core memories and things that we've experienced to be negative, is that our brain doesn't understand the difference between when we are remembering a traumatized event and when we are in that traumatized event. So every time you're remembering something that happened to you that was difficult to go through, or that caused you anxiety or trauma or difficulty, your brain is thinking that you're in that memory. You're actually experiencing that level of danger now. So that's not good. That's going to produce a stress response hormone quite a lot. Dr. Joe Dispenza says that when the brain gets that rush of energy from the remembered emotion, the brain produces the same chemistry and senses the same emotional signature. He says the brain sends out the same hardwired neurotransmitters as if the event has happened again. So you can see now why some people can get into a kind of thought warp, and they're just not able to get over certain things. Let's say you had a really terrible breakup, and your emotional response to that breakup as an unmanaged mind was incredibly emotional, and it's now kind of a core, belief in you that relationships are going to hurt you, that it's just too risky to even go there. That's one example of how the refractory period can negatively impact your present. And of course, with all of these things, it's really taking us away from the present moment. So this was a kind of introductory video on why we are more predisposed to thinking negative thoughts. I'm going to come back, and I'm probably going to focus on, for the next video, how we can mind our business and how we can solely focus on the things that are within our control, but why society and modern day living kind of points towards focusing on the things that we can't control, such as what people think of us, what we should be doing, just belief systems about ourselves that are supposed to mean something. And if our negativity bias is getting in there, we're going to make it mean something negative as opposed to positive. Ultimately, what these negative thoughts do is just prevent us from living the life that we want to live in peace and harmony with ourselves. So yeah, this is just an introduction. I'm working on a project myself that I'm going to be producing, and it's going to be a written piece of work on thought work, intentional thoughts, and I'll probably get into some detail about meditation and that kind of stuff. But before that, I'm just going to do 4 videos. This is the first. If you like it, that's great, and hopefully you get something from it. So take care.